we have Jay Hapala, and Jay will be talking on the current trends in consumer fraud from the AARP Fraud Watch Network. I just need to move my notes down here a little bit. So as the pandemic has progressed through the stages of crisis, response, and as we're moving into recovery, let's take away the Delta variant, scammers have done what they always do, use the headlines to steal money and personal information from vulnerable and unsuspecting victims. So what Jay is going to share with us today and help us to understand is what some of the current scams are and what the underlying tactics are that con artists are using to victimize people. Help us to understand the steps that we can take to protect against financial loss, and help us to become motivated to not only help ourselves, but to help others as well. So a little bit of background information on Jay, or an introduction to Jay. Jay is the Associate State Director of Community Engagement with AARP Minnesota, and he leads their Fraud Watch network. And this program serves to educate consumers about fraud, scams, and identity theft. And he and the AARP Fraud Watch volunteers have met with hundreds of community groups, law enforcement officials, and fraud investigators, learning how people are being targeted right now. Jay has worked and served in the not-for-profit sector for 20 years, building volunteer programs, and now he is doing the same to build a network of fraud fighters with AARP.
Thanks for the really great introduction, and I just appreciate the chance to speak with all of you. So with AARP's fraud education work, it really does start with our members. We have 37 million members across the country. When we survey them about what issues they're interested in and also what they're concerned about, always, whenever we ask, it's at the top of the list that people want to stay safe from financial crime. They want to protect themselves, they want to protect their loved ones, and it's a really important issue. It's a big problem. It's gotten worse throughout the pandemic here, and I'll explain through the presentation some reasons for that. We'll start by talking about the environment that we're all living and operating in right now. Delta has its own meaning with the virus, but it also means change. And whenever there are changes and just new experiences for people, that is a risk factor that makes people vulnerable to fraud. So we'll set the stage. I gotta give you your red meat, because people all want to, find out about these fascinating scams. So part of our program is that we take hundreds of reports of scams through our national call center every week, about 100,000 scam reports over the course of a year. And then we take that information and share it with the public, whether it's through presentations like this, or whether it's through our publications and on our website, and alerts that we send out to our members and our volunteer network. So I work with a big group of volunteers. I'm sure Francois and the team there in Idaho have a big group of volunteers that are out there educating people too. With the environment that we're living in right now, these are the type of conditions that in normal times the scammers have to work so hard to create, and the environment is favorable for the scammers instead of for the rest of us who are trying to stay safe right now, starting with that fear and uncertainty that makes us all more vulnerable. People have been isolated, and that is something scammers have to work so hard in normal times to create. When someone is considering a financial transaction, if they don't have a chance to talk with someone else about it, they're much more at risk for making a big mistake. We're all more available, and so there's a misconception about who is being targeted by scams and who is being victimized by scams. People say, well, older people are victimized more often because they don't understand the technology, because they're more trusting, because they have memory loss. Of course, these are all generalizations, and they play a factor. But the real reason that you hear older people talking about being targeted by scams more often is the availability. If you're working all day long and not retired, you may not be answering your cell phone all day long, or looking at your emails, or engaging in other places where the scammers are active. But older folks, many of whom are retired, are just more available. And then if you're like me during the pandemic, sitting here alone in my dining room, and your cell phone rings, you might be picking it up. and talking to a scammer more often than you would if you were racing around your office or doing your job in normal times. Then we're all using this anonymous technology more than we used to. I'll bet a lot of you are familiar with the tech support scam, where people typically get a phone call from an imposter who says they work for Microsoft or Google or Apple and they want to fix your computer. Well, a tool that they use as part of that scam would be a video conference platform, including Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be. And then they convince their victim to share their screen, exactly like what I'm doing here, except for the scammer coaches that victim to go on to, say, their banking website and enter their password, all while the scammer is watching. And there's other ways that technology can be used in a tech support scam as well. And then another thing that is creating this environment that is so ripe for scams is that, trillions and trillions of dollars in cash are flowing into the economy. That money is spoken for by a lot of people who just need to pay the bills. But for others, if there's a scammer on the phone telling them they should make an investment or spend it in whatever other way, that cash is available when before these economic impact payments were made, a scammer might just hit a dead end with their victim because there's no money in the bank. So more about the environment, and I want you to consider here, what are the scammers going after? And it's obvious that money would be at the top of that list. They're trying to convince their victim to send money through the mail, to give over a credit card number, to make a wire transfer, to go buy gift cards. And that's true. But especially as professionals, I want you to consider that all of these scams that we're going to go through today, they could be designed to achieve a variety of different goals for the scammers. Money, sure, but also the personal information for identity theft. And so when a victim is convinced to share their social security number, their date of birth, their other personal information, that information can be used to steal someone else's money, namely applying for credit in that victim's name. They want access to your device, and this could be for a variety of different reasons, like a video conference I was describing before. If they have access to your device, they could also use that to victimize other people, to steal personal information. They want access to their victims' accounts, so that would be what is commonly occurred or described as hacking, although it's not hacking. In a lot of cases, it's social engineering, where on the phone or by an email or a text or through a website, the scammer is convincing someone to share their passwords, whether to their bank account or social media account or their email account, whatever it might be. Social media account, I guess I said that. And then once the scammer has access to that account, they can use it in any other number of ways to victimize other people or the persons whose account they have access to. And then something that's really increased over the pandemic is that they're convincing, well, if you talk to government officials, they call it money mule scams, and it often come in the form of work from home job advertisements. A lot of people in the pandemic obviously lost their job. They'd love to work at home where they don't get exposed to the virus. And so they reply to these work from home jobs, some of which are big scams where the workers at home, their job is to process payments through their own bank account, and they're helping the scammers take this money and launder it and making it next to impossible for law enforcement to trace these funds. It's very rare to recover funds from scam victims for reasons I'll describe as we go through, one of which is that these money mules are convinced to help. And right here in Woodbury, Minnesota, where I live, I was talking with our local detective, and she worked on a case where in Philadelphia, the law enforcement and the prosecutors had traced money being laundered in this way right here to Woodbury, Minnesota. And it was this 20-something kid who'd replied to a work from home job. And he figured it out though. And then he kept on doing it because he, in order to meet his work goals, had been using his own credit card to make ends meet as he was supposed to be processing all of these payments. So he's getting some prison time here, I suppose, in Pennsylvania. So it's not just the money. So, and what I'm trying to get across here is that any of these scams that I'm going to describe, they could be designed to achieve a number of these different goals for the bad guys. And across these scams, there are always or almost always red flags that we're looking out for. It's almost always heightened emotions. They're trying to get people excited because, as human beings, when our emotions take over, we're not making smart financial decisions. So that's the first goal for the scammer, is to get someone excited because they've won a prize or they're going to, you know, be happy, or to get them fearful. And our research shows that the fear factors in scams are much more powerful for people than even the you've won the lottery type scams, but both of them work. And I guess I can just give an example. Just this week, we got a call in our call center from someone who got involved with a utility scam. So someone was calling on the phone, just threatening them that their electricity is going to be shut off because they need to pay some back payments. There was a mistake, and they need to pay these what they owe to stop their electricity being shut off. And this victim sent something like $400 to the scammer. And what was so powerful about it for this family and for the victim is that they had there, as a caregiver for someone with disability living in their home, they need the electricity to run the machines that keep that person alive. So that fear, of course, is very powerful. Time pressure, you got to act now. If you don't act now, you're going to miss out. That isolation I've already described as a red flag. If the scammers are telling people, look, you can't tell anyone about this deal, this investment that I want you to make. If we found out that you have talked about this with anyone else, we're going to pull the rug out from under this opportunity for you. The threats, if you don't act now, we're going to shut off your electricity. And the anonymous payments. So I'm going to make this point throughout. The scammers often don't want to be paid by credit card or debit card or automatic bill pay. What they want to be paid, how they want to be paid, is very specific. And this is the biggest red flag, or one of them, that I try to get across to people, is that if you're dealing with your utility company or the Social Security Administration, in real life, they're never going to ask for payments in these ways. But if you're dealing with a scammer, they're going to want a wire transfer, a gift card, cash, or something like Bitcoin, maybe increasingly peer-to-peer payment like Zelle or Venmo or PayPal. But those three that I just listed, the peer-to-peer, they do have some consumer protections. When we're talking about wire transfers, cash, and gift cards, there's almost no consumer protections, and no one else is looking out for the consumer or liable for the losses other than the victim. And that's why the scammers want to get paid that way, because no professionals like you are looking over their shoulder trying to help them with that. Okay, let's get into the specific scams. And I realize that you probably have heard of some of these. Many of us have. I'll bet you haven't heard of all of them. And then I encourage you just to think of these in terms of those goals that the scammers have and how they might achieve any of them with a vaccine scam. So, you know, we all know about the vaccine, and it's kind of remarkable how many different ways and means. Like the Vikings, Minnesota Vikings, have a preseason football game this weekend, and anyone can show up and get their vaccine at the football game and be entered in a drawing to win tickets and all this crazy stuff. Our governor says you can get $100 cash somehow now if you get your vaccination. So we're trying all these wild things to get people vaccinated, and that plays in the con artist's favor, because if the phone rang right now and someone says, hey, we're going to give you $500 if you make an appointment to get the vaccine right now, someone might think, hey, yeah, I heard they're trying all this weird stuff. And then they might ask for personal information or credit card information or bank account information so you can receive this $500, but then it's just a scam. If you're like me, the Amazon delivery truck is coming almost every day to your front door. And because of that, we're seeing a huge increase in the online retail scams. Some of them are as simple as fake websites where you see this great deal for a pair of shoes that you want to buy, and you enter your payment information, and the shoes never show up because it's just a fake website. I guess probably, well, it's common, but the one we get reports about a lot right now are people getting emails from Amazon imposters, and they say, your Dell laptop is on the way, and your account has been charged $899. And then the victim says, well, I didn't buy this laptop. What in the world is this all about? And then you call the number in the email, and they say, oh, yeah, we'll give you a refund for that. We just need your banking information. Same thing with delivery. Though I think the little piece with the delivery scam is it often says your delivery has been delayed. So, again, if you're like me, you probably have 5 pending Amazon deliveries that you're waiting for, and you get an email and it says, delivery's been delayed. We need you to verify your address here, or verify some information here. You click on it, and it's a website designed to collect information. Okay, I need your help is how I describe the scam that is very powerful by imposters who commonly impersonate church leaders or religious leaders. And if you think about your church or your place of worship, that they probably have a big website with like all the email addresses and names of the people who go to the church, or and so the scammers can look on that website, and then they contact people in the area saying that Pastor Smith wants you to make a donation of a gift card so that it can help with their charity work. And I've talked to plenty of people who just run down to the store, and then they respond to the email with the number off of the gift card, and at that moment, poof, the money is gone. And then I just described the work from home scam as we were going through here. Okay, more trending scams. Romance scams are definitely on the rise. As I was talking with one woman down in Texas, and she called in to one of our coronavirus town hall meetings, and a lot of people had questions about work and jobs and staying safe from the virus. She wanted to know, how am I supposed to go on a date if I have to stay socially distanced from people? So plenty of people are now, more than in the past, are dating online. And there are a lot of imposters on dating sites. Now, the dating sites have implemented really good technology to stop people from making fake profiles and, scamming each other through the dating websites. And that's why on the dating websites, the common red flag is that if the person you've met wants to communicate in a different way, like Google Chat or some other communication service, or even text, or not communicate through the website, that is a big red flag. However, what we're finding now is that actually most romance scams start in places other than the actual dating websites. They start on social media sites, and they even start through gaming apps. So if you're someone who plays Scrabble on your phone with other people from all around the world, or maybe you play poker or other games on the phone, but you have a profile and you're able to communicate with other players, that's where a lot of these relationships are starting. And romance scams are just really difficult for families. They're so emotional and really devastating. I mean, the effects of being victimized by a financial crime, especially something like a romance scam, goes far beyond the bank account and really gets into people's emotional and mental health and their family relationships. They are really devastating. I'm trying to think of what else maybe to say about romance scams, but another red flag. It's like the scammers have workshopped their profiles so perfectly that often the story is the same. It's that the imposter is this very heroic figure living and working overseas. They're a doctor in Africa saving the world, or they're a military person on a ship in the North Sea, and that's why it's hard for them to communicate. They can't do a FaceTime call, but they can send chat messages and email messages and such. And then inevitably there's some crisis and they need some money. So we get a lot of reports. Just a sec. We get throughout the pandemic, I think, like I've talked about some vaccine scams, I've talked about work from home scams. Yeah, the pandemic has increased these, but like the Social Security imposter scam is still among the top reports that we're getting nationally. It just works on people, and the story goes is that you have to call us back at Social Security right away. There's an issue and you need to resolve it. And I thought I was being smart. I called them back one day, and they said, well, the Social Security office, how can we help you? I said, well, you called me, so you tell me how you can help me. And the woman said, well, I work in a different department, so I don't know exactly why we called you. You need to describe it to me. So there's at least some level of sophistication there in social engineering. They would have wanted my personal information, but the story she told me was that my identity had been used down in Texas in a smuggling crime, and I needed to clear some things up. So again, it was that fear factor. I heard that more than a few of you on the line here are involved in real estate, and so you know about wire transfers and how people, they make their real estate transactions with wire transfers. I've already said that there are little or no consumer protections. I'll bet in Idaho you have some rules about disclosure for your customers and clients, that you have to notify them that there are scammers and imposters who try to insert themselves into the real estate transaction when they know someone's selling their house, which is quite public because the ad's listed on the internet. And then what happens is on the day or very around the time that the person will be going to make this wire transfer, they get a fake email with the wrong instructions on how to send $100,000 via wire transfer, and they follow those instructions and they lose that money. In Minnesota, one case, a couple lost $205,000 because they got one of these fake emails on the very morning that they were supposed to make the wire transfer in the exact same amount. So my theory about that case is that someone had been reading their emails. So it could have been as though, like, say that one of them went to the library and they forgot to log out of their Gmail account where they were sending emails back and forth with their mortgage company and the closers, and someone else got got access to their email account and was able to basically copy and paste from those real emails fake instructions on how to make that wire transfer, and they lost that money. I have also the theory that it could be an inside job, and I don't mean it was like people working at the mortgage company or them, but instead, like, could it be a family member? Could it be just someone who knows their business and the fact that they're about to make this big transaction? And then you might have heard, maybe some of you even experienced this for yourself, that tens of thousands of Americans had their identity used in applications for unemployment benefits during the pandemic. And many states were just in such a rush to get this relief process that maybe they didn't go through the normal and necessary steps to verify these claims for unemployment. And so what's happening, and most of it's happened by now, I think, but what happened was people would get these notices from the IRS that they received this unemployment benefit and they need to pay their taxes on it. And, then President Biden said people don't have to pay, or maybe it was just in Minnesota, but I thought it might be the president said you don't have to pay income tax on those unemployment benefits. And the sheer number of people who got scammed and were going to have this fixed by the IRS could have been a reason that they decided not to have people pay taxes on it. So as people are getting back to travel, we're seeing more reports in the last month even of travel type scams. And it's a lot like what I described with retail scams. It's just fake websites that advertise these beautiful vacations and places to visit, or like an Airbnb or what do you call those? Generally, they're like vacation rentals. But the scammers just copy and paste pictures and make fake websites that look like they're that you can get this great deal on a nice vacation rental, but they're just there to steal money and collect personal information. The advice with the travel scams is just to make sure you're not responding to the latest ad on Facebook that you've never heard of this company before, but instead work with the companies that you know what they are. And just like romance scams with the dating websites, like VRBO and those websites, they have controls in place to prevent these from happening. And so what you see is a listing on VRBO, but once a person starts communicating with the lister, then they're encouraged to start communicating through a different system and then make the payment outside of the system, such as with PayPal or Venmo. And that's how the scammers are subverting those controls that the legitimate websites have in place. So I already described a utility billing scam with the poor woman who was having her electricity shut off. So that's happening. And then at back to school time, what happens is kids are going off to college, maybe they're going across the country to school. And so it's not like if they need a place to stay, they can just go there and start touring apartments. But even if they're not going so far, they might respond to an ad on the internet or Craigslist or whatnot about a place to rent and the price is right and it's in a great location. But the person who made the listing says, well, I cannot let you tour the property because I'm in California taking care of my sick mother. So what I need you to do is send me your security deposit right now and we'll reserve this property for you. And they show up on the day before school starts and knock on the door and someone else lives there because it was just this copy and pasted listing. So the car warranty scams, I'll bet you get, if you're like me, you get a ton of these phone calls. I get one at least every day. The phone number is spoofed, so it looks like it's coming from within Minnesota, and they're trying to get me to buy a car warranty. And some of these are legitimate companies who are breaking the rules by not respecting or following the procedures to comply with the do not call list, but some are just scammers who are trying to get me to send them money or information. And the reason, what's so, I think, kind of fascinating or confusing to people is like, why do they have this information? Why are they doing this? And the reason for it is that car or vehicle registration data is public information. So the DMVs, at least in Minnesota, many of which are private, they're allowed to sell that information to people who want to buy it. And some of the people who want to buy it are scammers who use it for what I just described. And then I think I also, at the beginning, described the tech support scams that are still very common and tricky and get people to share their screen and then steal their information. And some, it's like I can't even describe over a webinar how sophisticated some of these work because they start transferring money in and out of bank accounts, and the scammers they can quickly create screenshots. And so the scammer starts sharing his screen, and it looks like you're looking at your bank account website, except for the numbers have changed. So they can do that while they're talking with people. And then it looks like, oh, I've made a mistake with how I was supposed to get my refund or send money back. And then it switches back to their real bank account and they start transferring money out. Last but not least are Cute and Rowdy Puppies, which is the name of a fake website that was shut down where people were just posting pictures of cute little dogs for sale, putting time pressure on people who wanted to buy them, and collecting multiple deposits for dogs that didn't exist. And once someone puts in their down payment for the dog, guess what? Now we have to give it shots, and that's another $500. Now we need a special crate to ship it to you, and that costs more. Okay, so we spend 40 minutes talking about all the fascinating scams, and hopefully no one out there is shaking in their boots because knowledge is power, and we're talking about how you can protect yourself. Knowing about the scams makes people way more resistant to falling for the scam, so education is important. But what I'm about to share with you in the next 5 minutes or so here is how people can actually protect themselves. And it's probably different than what you've heard, but this is my recipe for how people can completely eliminate their liability for their risk for losing money to a scam. It's like knowing about them is one thing, but you're never going to know about every scam out there. Instead, I encourage people to focus on these 3 steps, and you'll never lose any money to scams. So if anyone out there is in the financial industry, banking or otherwise, you know that what consumers ought to be doing is monitoring their bank accounts, all their financial accounts, whether it's checking, credit, investment accounts. And that's our job as consumers in the United States and the way our laws work. So what we do is you monitor your bank accounts, whether it's on your app or some people still get their paper statements mailed. And if you notice a suspicious or unknown transaction, then you report it to your financial institution, and then it becomes the financial institution's liability for loss if you do that within a reasonable time, which has been identified as 60 days. So people get 60 days to report fraud, and then essentially the bank has 10 days to replace the funds. And if they're doing an investigation, which they'll do in many cases, that might take more than 10 days, but they have to replace the funds within 10 days. And if it's a credit card type payment, then you just don't have to pay that bill. Number 2, it's our job to monitor our credit, and this is how you make sure someone else isn't out there using your identity to get money from someone else. And the way to do that is on the website called annualcreditreport.com. So don't just do a web search for free credit report, because there are a lot of imposters out there with fake websites that are just there to collect your personal information. But instead, it's annualcreditreport.com, and you can do this for free 3 times a year, once each with each of the major credit reporting bureaus. And what you'll see is not your credit score, and that's not the important piece of information. But instead, what you want to look at is what accounts are open in your name, and it'll show you your payment history as well on those accounts. And if you notice an account that you don't recognize, then it's time to start the process for reporting identity theft and investigating that. So that's how that works. And then finally, it's the last loophole to close on your identity to make sure you don't lose any money is always pay with personal check, with debit card and credit card, and automatic bill pay. And anytime you're asked to pay with with cash, if you're asked to pay with a gift card, if you're asked to make a wire transfer, or PayPal or Venmo, if it's someone you don't normally deal with, or Bitcoins, these are the big red flags. So it's time to be completely cautious if anyone's asking for gift cards, wire transfer, Bitcoin, PayPal, Venmo. So do these 3 things, you're completely covered. Monitor the accounts, report fraud, check your credit periodically if there's anything you don't recognize, and focus on the payment processing. So finally, our contact information, we run this hotline. It's open from like 8 in the morning to 11 at night, where people can call and report scams or help navigate if they're trying to figure out if something might be a scam. And certainly if someone's been victimized and lost money, we can help them put the pieces back together and get in touch with the right agency that is there to help them. And then folks can visit the website, sign up for alerts. So as we get all these reports throughout the month, then we send out the alert to people so they can see what's new.